The wizards of the Witcher world are a colorful bunch. Healers, bankers, merchants, and scientists. In that last category, we also find Dorregaray of Vol. And he is not your regular scientist either. No, he is a mate to monsters, a friend to fiends. He is a druid among sorcerers, though he still, like all mages, thinks very highly of himself. Perhaps even more so. In short, he's the monster's version of an animals' rights activist, and the basic rights would include not being killed by witchers, which is why he doesn't get along with witchers and other mages for the most part. Geralt, however, becomes an exception. At least, eventually he does. Dorregaray meets the Witcher and his company, Borg 3 Jackdaws, otherwise known as the Golden Dragon, his 2 Zerrikanian warrior women, and Dandelion, while they're stopped in front of a barricade, leading to a green dragon. Said green dragon, of course, was being hunted. And contrary to what Geralt assumes, Dorregaray is not there to gather dragon ingredients after the beast is slain. No, he's there to stop others from hurting the dragon at all. Dorregaray turned to Geralt, having refused an additional glassful. In town, they're still talking about your basilisk, noble Witcher, and you are already taking an interest in the dragon, he said in a low voice. I'm curious to know if you intend to slay this endangered species for pleasure or for pay. Such curiosity is unusual, replied Geralt. When it comes from somebody who flocks double quick to the execution of a dragon to rip out his teeth. Aren't they precious for the making of your medicines and magical elixirs? Is it true, noble magician, that those ripped from still living dragons are the best? Are you sure that's why I'm here? As it was, though, they were all unable to move past the blockade, so, after an attempt to bribe the guards, Dorregaray instead pulled out his ivory wand and set a tree on fire. The distraction, along with some coin from Borg, allowed them to rush past and follow the king's retinue up the mountain and towards the dragon. When they're eventually allowed to join the group hunting the dragon, Dorregaray takes a bit of time to talk to Geralt about his monster hunting ways. You see, Dorregaray works off the idea that all monsters are good, and he defends his views with amazing tenacity, which, unsurprisingly, caused quite a bit of friction between the two gentlemen. But Geralt is not Dorregaray's only target. A knight, Ike of Denel, who slays monsters for free, earns the wizard's ire also. He's a rival, isn't he? You both lead in a similar activity. The difference being that the knight Ike is an idealist and you a professional. The difference is of no importance to the beings whom you slaughter. Don't compare me to Ike, Dorregaray. Who knows which of us two would come off worse as a result of your comparison? As you wish. To tell the truth, to me, you are just as loathsome as he is. Thank you. And don't mention it. The magician patted the neck of his horse, frightened by the shouting of Yarpen and his dwarves. As far as I'm concerned, Witcher, to make murder a vocation is disgusting, base, and stupid. Our world hangs in the balance. The destruction, the murder of any living being in this world threatens this balance. The absence of equilibrium leads to extinction, and thus the end of the world as we know it. Druid theory, declared Geralt. I know of it. An old hierophant introduced me to it before. In Rivia, 2 days after our conversation, rat men tore him to shreds. It wasn't evident that any kind of imbalance had occurred as a result. As much as Geralt tries to convince Dorregaray that slaying monsters is simply a necessary evil, the wizard would not have it. In his mind, the world is in balance as it is, with every species dealing with their own enemies. Completely destroying the natural enemies of the human race threatens this race as such, or, as he called humanity, our degenerate race. You know, magician, replied the Witcher, losing his temper. Perhaps you should visit a mother whose son has been devoured by a basilisk and explain to her that she should be delighted with her misfortune because it will enable the salvation of the degenerate human race. Wait and see how she answers you. Geralt was not the only one taking issue with Dorregaray's thoughts and theories, of course. Yennefer was one such dissenter. She instead posed that dragons are the greatest enemies of mankind, and thus must be exterminated, because they can attack cities even where walls are in place, and cities need to stay safe. so women can give birth without being burned to a crisp. Otherwise, the human race would never survive. Dorregaray looked at her with a strange smile on his lips. You know, Yennefer, I'd prefer not to be alive when the time comes that your idea of man's domination will come true, and the time when the same will take up their rightful place in nature. Fortunately, it will never arrive. You will consume each other, you will poison yourselves, you will succumb to fever and typhus, because it will be filth and lice, not dragons, that will threaten your splendid cities, where the women give birth every year, but where only one newborn baby out of 10 will succeed in living more than 10 days. Yes, Yennefer, of course. Breeding, and more breeding. Take care, my dear. Go and make some babies, as it's a more natural function with which to occupy yourself, rather than wasting time spouting nonsense. Goodbye. Dorregaray was not entirely wrong, of course, even if he was too crass about it. Not to mention that accounts of dragons randomly burning down cities packed with women in labor were few and far between. However, Dorregaray proved himself at least somewhat amicable when, during an avalanche, he shattered a rock about to crush both Geralt and Yennefer, saving both their lives in the process. It wasn't long now before they reached the clearing that led to the dragon's cave. The green dragon they were hunting, of course. Not the golden dragon they found sitting in front of the cave's entrance. A golden dragon, the most mystical of beings, rare, majestic, royal almost. Not to mention that this one spoke, telepathically. Of all monsters, this one most certainly deserved a defender, and a defender he would have. Lord Dorregaray, said Boholt, going up to the magician. Make yourself useful. Do you remember any legends or tales on the subject? What do you know about golden dragons? The magician smiled, standing up again in a dignified fashion. What do I know about golden dragons, you ask? Not much, but enough. Speak. Listen carefully, very carefully. Right here in front of us sits a golden dragon, a living legend, perhaps the last and only creature of its type to have survived your murderous folly. Legends should not be killed. I will not allow you to touch this dragon. Is that understood? You can put away your equipment and pack up your saddlebags and go home. Geralt was sure that a fight was going to erupt. He was wrong. Guildenstern broke the silence. Honorable magician, be careful what you say and to whom you say it. King Nidamir can order you, Dorregaray, to pack up your saddlebags and go to hell. Note that to suggest the same of him is improper. Is that clear? No, the magician replied proudly. It isn't, because I am, and remain, Master Dorregaray. I will not obey the orders of an insignificant king, governing a kingdom only visible from the top of a hill, and in command an abject, filthy, stinking fortress. Did you know, my lord Guildenstern, that with one wave of my hand I can transform you into cowpat, and your vulgar king into something much worse? Is that clear? It is unfortunate, of course, that Yennefer had ample cause to slay this particular dragon, so, in an unguarded moment, she threw a spell at Dorregaray, and the poor wizard got punched and kicked in the head, then tied to a wagon, alongside Geralt and Dandelion, who had tried to come to his defense, but were thwarted by Yennefer also. Of course, as Yennefer didn't plan to share the dragon with the rest of the dragon hunters, they tied her to the wagon as well. To Dorregaray's dismay, the group's escape plan was having Geralt use Igni to burn the ropes on Yennefer's wrists, which also started melting her skin off. Unsurprisingly, our poor magician fainted at the sight. This caused him to miss the rest of that particular story, of course, but it won't be the last time our Witcher meets with him. The next opportunity presented itself at the Thanedd Isle Ball, where Dorregaray was also attending in the role of spy for King Athane of Sidaris, which wasn't too surprising, as most sorcerers attending were spies to some degree. Regardless, he strikes up a conversation with Geralt over a drink, and notes that the Witcher's politeness to his colleagues was honestly wasted. Mages were conceited, envious, and mendacious, and Dorregaray had no problem venting about his fellow magicians to Geralt at all. You learn fast. Curses, where have you gained such wit, Witcher? On the roads you stride in search for dying species? To your health. You might not believe it, but you're one of the few here for whose health I honestly want to drink. Is this so? Geralt took a sip, savoring the taste, even despite the fact that I butcher dying species for a living. Don't gripe at my words. The wizard patted his arm. The banquet has just started. You'll probably speak to more people, so you ought to save some of your glib remarks. As for your occupation, you, Geralt, have at least enough dignity not to keep trophies. But take a look around. Go ahead, forget the etiquette. They like to be stared at. The Witcher obediently fixed his gaze on Sabrina Glevisig's breasts. Look closely. Dorregaray grasped his sleeve, pointing at the passing sorceress. Shoes made of horned agama's leather. Have you noticed? He nodded, insincerely, as he only took notice of what remained uncovered by the transparent chul bodice. Oh, and there we have a rock cobra. The wizard correctly identified another pair of shoes parading through the hall. The fashion, which had recently shortened the dresses, helped him with the task. And over there, white iguana, salamander, wyvern, spectacled caiman, basilisk, all of them, without exception, endangered species. Curses, why not stick to veal and pork leather? When Philippa shows up, dressed in yet another endangered species, Dorregaray loses his appetite to stay and converse with the Witcher any longer, and leaves them until much later that night. And by much later that night, I mean during the rebellion, of course. Dorregaray was among the neutral mages, unwilling to fight either the northern sorcerers or Vilgefortz and his Nilfgaardian allies. And all this cost him was, well, almost his life. When the fighting well and truly broke loose, he ran for his life, bolting down the stairs as fast as he could. Still not fast enough. A Scoia'tael shot him in the back, landing the mage right in Geralt's arms. And just in time, too, because a second arrow came flying soon after, this time aimed at his throat. Thankfully, Geralt managed to drag Dorregaray away from danger easily enough, though the arrow had already punctured his lung. If it wasn't for Marty Sordegren, the healing sorceress, who accompanied Geralt down the stairs, he would have surely died. As it was, he didn't die, and went on to become a sorcerer of some note, writing many books on various subjects. The Wonderful World of Insectoids, for example, surprisingly about insects, or Against the Institution of Marriage, where he compares royal wyverns to humans due to both species' aggressive nature. And, of course, The World We Have Lost, on extinct monsters. But he also wrote on the Vran Society, though you can hardly call them monsters, and he was one of the mages who posed the theory that the Vran died from an epidemic. That's not entirely true, of course, but then again, monsters are his specialty, not people, so you can hardly blame him.